1-800-5800-1800. And we have some of Michigan's finest professionals in studio to help you think about your American dream. This week is no exception. Rob has been talking to us about the importance of covering your assets, man. Cover your assets. When it comes to this week's weather, everybody's running to their policy to see what does it say about water damage. But before we get there, we were talking about the anatomy of a policy. We covered the dwelling coverage, the dwelling extension, loss of use, and personal property. Is there another point there?
Yeah, and it's a good time, I guess, to talk a little bit about, the liability aspect. And that's one of the things, the 3 points we're going to cover today. And this is a good time to do that because it's the next part of the policy that I want to talk about. So liability coverage is so important. And typically what we find with people is they insure the golden eggs and not the goose properly.
Okay.
And the goose is you. We lay the golden eggs, right? And that's kind of an analogy I like to use with my clients to say, whether it's a conversation about life insurance or liability coverage, it really doesn't matter. It's the same conversation because most people are very underinsured from a liability perspective. Hopefully a lawsuit never happens, as I tell people, but in the event it does, you can be in financial ruin.
Yeah.
And we want to kind of tally up. I ask a lot of questions about assets, financial assets, liquid assets, real estate assets, things like that, and then we figure out what's that number. What are we protecting here? And your biggest asset's is your ability to earn income, and we need to protect that properly as well. So when we start adding all those things together, that number gets pretty big. So typically, I like to, whatever that number is, I like to, at the very minimum, insure them from a liability perspective for that amount, and then hopefully even more. And we usually do that through what we call a personal liability umbrella.
Personal liability umbrella. But let me just point out what we're talking about here, because there's more to your liability coverage here than your own personal residence, right? I mean,
Sure.
You may be a business owner,
Absolutely.
and you may have other real estate investments, and you may have money, set aside for whatever, that rainy day and that nest
Sure.
egg and all those things need to be adequately covered. That's
Correct.
why you want to work with a professional who's asking you the right questions here. Because, God forbid, the proverbial slip and fall could be really costly.
No, and that's absolutely, when we're talking back about the homeowner's policy, you do have the slip and falls. You do have dog bite situations.
Dog bites, yeah.
That's another big one.
That's a
that
big
you
one.
have. You have vicarious liability situations where maybe someone was at your house and had a cocktail or two and drove away. As the homeowner, there's liability.
And that's so
exposure
scary.
everywhere.
There's exposure everywhere.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I mean, I have the sweetest dog in the world, but if that dog doesn't know you and has a bad day,
Sure.
you got to be covered.
And that's part of that liability discussion. That's what your homeowner's liability coverage covers you for, those types of events, and hopefully they never happen like we talked about. But it extends to your automobiles. It extends to a lot of different things that we do. Out the social media world that we're in right now, slander, defamation of character. Those are types of extended coverage you can get with a liability umbrella that may not be covered under your other liability policies. So again, we usually have this conversation with our clients. We tie it all in, and then we look at, the bigger picture.
Yes, that's not something I didn't even think of.
Yeah, this is why you, American Dreamer, you need to work with the great professionals. Nobody's an expert in everything.
Right.
I'm not an expert in insurance and liability umbrellas. I know I needed a real umbrella Monday when I was trying to get home. We had to park 2 blocks from the house, Rob, and wade our way home. The water was so high. But this liability umbrella covers a lot of things that we're not thinking about when we say, I need insurance.
Sure.
Call an insurance guy. Rob Peterson with Rob Peterson Insurance Agency, Inc. is the expert that can really answer the questions and even help you know what questions you should be asking. But listen.